This video is brought to you by the 3-Minute Board Game patrons. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. Warning, this video contains an absolute bucket load of spoilers for the Scarlet Keys. Viewer discretion is advised. Kia ora koutou everyone, and welcome to this review of the Scarlet Keys. So what is the Scarlet Keys? The Scarlet Keys is the most recently released campaign for Arkham Horror, and it's come out in this giant big box. You get a big box like this with all the story content in it, and a smaller box that has all the player cards in it. Now the last video we did was a deep dive on the Path to Carcosa, which was the second campaign that they published after the Dunwich Legacy. The Scarlet Keys is the 8th campaign they've published, and we've jumped straight from their second campaign to the most recent one. And the reason for that is, one of my crew, he'd already played all the other campaigns. This is the one that he hadn't played yet, so we thought, why not give this one a go? And I'm really glad we did, because it was very different and a very interesting campaign, and I'm really pleased that we got through it. Now, what makes the Scarlet Keys unique and a very different campaign from everything else that's been published to date? Well, first let's look at the theme, and that starts off with the Scarlet thing. So, there is a group in the Scarlet Keys that are normally led by a character called the Red Gloved Man, and they all have different red outfits. It's like a unifying feature, a unifying trait amongst this group. They're known as the Congress of the Keys. And each of them is really unique. I'm going to bring up some of the pictures from the promotional material that Fantasy Flight Games used to advertise the Scarlet Keys, just to show you how sort of different and interesting and intriguing the members of this group are. Now you'll notice that some of the characters are very, very normal looking and very human, and some of them less so. And one of the cool things about the Scarlet Keys is getting out there and discovering and meeting these different characters. Now, the frame up for the campaign is that you have been pulled into a secret organization. It's a little bit of Indiana Jones or James Bond meets Arkham Horror. And you are set globe-trotting around the world to discover what this nefarious group is up to. And that brings me to another one of the really defining features of the Scarlet Keys, and that is, it is an open campaign. Now, you start off with the same starting mission every time you play this campaign, and you end up with the same finale, although the finale can be structured differently based on your decisions throughout the game. But you end up leaving and exploring this map, and you are given 35 time units with which to explore the map. And you can spend those time units traveling around, having encounters, and having missions, or coming across missions. There's probably an optimal way to get around there to get the maximum amount of XP, but I think the fun part of this is discovering it all. And we went through once, and we did not do, I believe, 4 of the 8 incidental missions. So we did the starting mission, the end mission, we did 4 other missions, and we did a standalone in there as well, because the Scarlet Keys is designed to fit in standalones as well if you want to play them. And that's something the other campaigns, it always feels off to sort of break the campaign halfway off to jaunt off to Venice or to go to Louisiana or to do one of the other side missions because of how the narrative is structured in those campaigns. In the Scarlet Keys, you are globetrotting. So if you turn up in Venice, well, you can just run that mission. And that's the thing, we ended up going to Monte Carlo and running Fortune and Folly, which is an amazing standalone scenario. If you have not tried Fortune and Folly, it is Ocean's 11 meets Arkham Horror. And it's all about planning a casino heist and everything going to custard about halfway through. Really cool scenario. And it fits seamlessly into this campaign as well for us because the reward for finishing that one was gaining a key. And that's another thing about the Scarlet Keys. A lot of these missions end up giving you these powerful relics. The keys manipulate reality. They do unique and interesting stuff, and they have like a good side and a bad side. And if they're on the good side, and you control one, you can use its power and flip it over. But then you have to do the bad thing to flip it back over. And the baddies can also control them. And that means there's this fight all the way through the campaign over who gets to control this collection of keys. And going into the finale, some of the keys will be in the hands of the baddies, some of them will be in your hands, and some you won't have discovered, because if you manage to discover all the keys in one playthrough, well done. We were something like 4 or 5 short, but we got an extra bonus key from the standalone, and that that really solidified that particular standalone, Fortune and Folly, really fits under the umbrella of the Scarlet Keys and could possibly even have just been part of the campaign. Now, with the map, there's a whole bunch of stuff on here and a whole bunch of entries in the book. Now, my group are all old school role players, so the idea of reading aloud page after page of flavor text, that's our jam. We like doing that kind of stuff. We'll put on the silly voices. We'll try our best to do the accents if we can. We usually can't, but we put in a genuine try. The campaign, though, has a bucket load of reading. There's a lot of times you will go to a location and read a whole bunch of text, make some decisions, but not necessarily get into an actual Arkham campaign regular scenario. You know, you won't be setting up the table, you won't be playing cards, you'll just be making decisions and then moving on to the next location. And you can do this like 4 or 5 times in a row, depending on where you are on the board and what decisions you're making. So you end up spending a good half an hour to an hour or so just reading from the book, which might not be ideal for some people. As I say, it didn't bother us, and in fact, we found it quite immersive and very interesting. But I imagine playing it the second time around, getting to those locations, if you're making the same decisions again, that will be a bit tiresome. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how we feel about all that reading and talking aloud if we go back through the campaign again. And we definitely want to go back through the campaign again. It was a sort of collective decision afterwards that we missed at least half of what's going on here. As I say, at least 4 scenarios we missed out on. And it's clearly more stuff for us to play on a second run through. So we did not go through the Americas or Europe really at all. We kind of skipped out of Europe as soon as we could. We did a lot of Africa, South America, and Asia, but we didn't really do Europe or North America at all. So yeah, or Central America. So yeah, if you've played through, you'll know which scenarios we missed based on that. On top of the keys, there's 2 new mechanics that the Scarlet Keys introduced, and the first one is Concealed. Now, Concealed, what it will do is there's all these little mini cards here, and some monsters will have a Concealed rating of, say Concealed 3. And that means you'll get their card and 3 blank cards, shuffle them up and deal 1 out to each location. And that represents that you don't know where the creature currently is. They then sit in a place called the Shadows, which is a sort of half off the board, half on the board place, where you can't target them, but some effects from the encounter deck, Mythos deck, can allow them to target you. So ideally you want to find them in the Shadows and deal with them, pull them out of the Shadows and give them a thwack. And finding cards in the Shadows means you have to either do direct damage or discover a clue or do a evade test in that location. And if you succeed, instead of collecting a clue or whatever, you go, I'm going to reveal that concealed card. And it just happened to be that the group we had set up, through no foresight or no planning, because we didn't know about this mechanic, was exceptionally good at doing this. My character had a lot of direct damage. Fraser was playing Agnes, who has direct damage at will, so she could just go ping and use her natural ability to do 1 damage to unveil a card. And Carolyn, so other Jared was playing Carolyn, and he had the field agents that did automatic clue gathering, so they could ping them as well. So we had this innate group of characters that just happened to be able to get all over the top of that mechanic. So be curious to go back through it with characters that don't have direct damage and don't have that sort of stuff on call. I was playing Carson Sinclair, and I started off with beat cops in my deck that could do that, and then I ended up graduating up to agency backups. So the character was all about getting his agency backups down and keeping them healthy and using them to get direct damage and direct clue getting. But with the concealed mechanic, that just meant that he had this reservoir of ability to go, boom, discover that card. And it meant in the grand finale, where you are fighting against something and there's a lot of concealed cards involved, it was pretty easy. It was very, very easy finale. And this is Unlike Carcosa, we won the finale, which is pretty good. So Concealed I thought was pretty cool, but I feel that we were quite well tricked out for it, completely and utterly accidentally. And I can imagine in some high shroud locations, Concealed could get to be a bit of a pain in the ass. The second mechanic was Hollow. And what Hollow does is you have to set cards aside from your deck as hollows. So say you've got a hand of 5 cards and you're told to set aside 2 hollows. So you put, say, a first aid and a machete to one side. Then later in the game there'll be effects that do, no, they're out of the game. You can't access them unless specifically instructed. But there will be cards that come along later that go, if you have a hollow matching a card in play, destroy that card or do something to that card. And it felt really mean. You're like, okay, I've had to hollow out randomly an integral card for how my deck works. And then the card comes along and goes, all right, and kill the other one you've got in play. So it's really anti-combos. If you get unlucky with hollows, it can really dismantle any of the sort of internal synergy you have going on within your deck construction. And I found it really irritating. Like, it took out... so playing Carson, I was trying to do a deck where I didn't do many tests because he has stats 2 across the board. He's rubbish at doing checks. The goal was to give out as many bonus actions to the other players as possible and then do as much testless damage and testless clue getting as I could through allies and other means. And one of those cards that I had was toe-to-toe in combination with Guard Dog. So that allowed me to attack an enemy, do +1 damage, automatically hit. Then they would retaliate, hit the Guard Dog, and do more damage back. So it's a 3 damage effect where I didn't have to do a test. And it hollowed out in the last game my toe-to-toes. And, it was really frustrating losing one of those in the last round. When you're building a deck that relies on certain key points or certain cards to be recurred, and one of them is hollowed out, and then the second one is hollowed out by another effect, it's really, really frustrating. So Concealed and the whole concealment card things, that's a great mechanic. That was a lot of fun. Hollow, yeah, I can't say that I particularly enjoyed in that one. So as for the individual scenarios themselves, they were good. Like, there was no scenario that I was like, wow, that blew me away, like there were some in Path to Carcosa, but I felt they were all quite solid. I quite like the one where there are a lot of civilians. I think it's one of the desert locations. There's a lot of civilians and there's just a zombie apocalypse basically happening. And you have to save as many as possible. Now, we did really well on that, but we also got to it very early. And I believe if we'd got to that scenario later, it would have been really, really hard. And I also really like some of the members of the Congress of the Keys. In particular, the character that we refer to as Carmen Sandiego. And if you see a picture of her, which I'll put one up, you'll see why we called her that. And she ended up dogging us through our campaign. So we encountered her pretty early, and then she kept popping up in other scenarios and just causing us grief all the way through the game. So she kind of became our primary antagonist instead of the Red Glove Man. And we ended the campaign with 29 experience points, so which is exactly the same total that we ended Path to Carcosa with, which is kind of freaky. So it's not a huge XP campaign. You probably get more, but again, we didn't really know what we were doing and just meandered around the map, going to locations that sounded of interest to us. And I'm sure if you had like a lightning plan, you could probably get another 10 XP before the finale. Would I recommend the campaign to people? Absolutely. I'm not sure this is a good one to start off with. I think this might be better suited for people who've played the game a fair bit. The cool things about it is the openness. There's the replayability of going around the board. Is the sort of sense of agency you have, which you don't really in any of the other campaigns. You kind of just go from scenario A to B. And it does represent a sort of change in philosophy when they move to doing these big boxes instead of selling the pack. So when they did that, they had to make the scenarios like linear. They had to make the whole thing go from end to end. And the Scarlet Keys is just way more ambitious than that. And I think overall it works. I think overall this is a good, fun package. We had a really neat time. I'm not sure it had the same highs as the Path to Carcosa with some of the scenario designs. But it also didn't have any real bum notes. Like, there weren't any scenarios we played that were like, that was a bit naff. So I think sort of middling consistency and sort of solidness of scenario design without really anything that leapt out and went, way, this is the best game I've ever played. So yeah, a really good time, but not necessarily the greatest Arkham Horror has been for us. Now, immediately after finishing the Scarlet Keys, we are going to go straight into the Innsmouth Conspiracy. So hopefully in about 2 months' time, I'll be back here talking about our encounters with the lovely Deep Ones of Innsmouth. I've put a link in the description of the video to my Carson Sinclair deck, which I've lovingly called the Butlerian Jihad. Yeah, and you can see how a deck that revolves around doing testless damage and not taking tests would work. So the main focus of that deck is, of course, its allies and testless damage, but it's also about getting blessed tokens into the bag that help the other players out as well. So it's very much a mix between blessing and, you know, direct testless damage. And strangely, very fun to play. Like, I thought Carson might be a bit crap, but he ended up being a whale of a time. And if you're into roleplay or just thinking about how the game works, the agency backup, we just imagined that was just an army of butlers. So everywhere that Carson went, he had this just army of butlers that just turned up and did everything. And Safeguard allowed him to follow around other characters. And yeah, he was just generally this Bible-thumping, in-your-face butler who refused to die and refused to go away. Oh, and because of his Dark Pact weakness, would just occasionally spill scalding hot tea on you. Anyway, a link to that Carson deck is in the description. Check that out if you can. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Oh yeah, on the first night we played the Scarlet Keys, this is what greeted people as they approached, and this is what the inside of the room looked like. I kind of went a little bit overboard with the mood lighting.